Now, the thing about a keyless chuck is it's very quick, it's very fast, you don't have to use a key to tighten it. But when you buy a chuck, I showed you these number 80 drill bits. If you're going to be drilling something this fine, you have to make sure and buy a chuck that can tighten on this bit, because not all chucks will tighten on a bit as fine as these bits. And another thing is that when you buy a chuck, the chuck only comes the chuck. You don't get the arbor with it. And the chuck comes, it will tell you whether it's a number 2 Jacobs taper, a number 3 Jacobs taper, or whatever. And then you have to buy the arbor separately. This is an R8 arbor. This is one out of my lathe. This is a number 3 Morse taper. So you have to know what you're doing when you buy the arbor, whether it's a number 3 Jacobs taper, whether it's a number 2 Jacobs taper, whether you want something for your lathe, whether you want something for your milling machine. So be careful. Okay, these are also center drills. They come in lots of different sizes depending on what you're going to be doing. Okay? Now, this is also a center drill. These are countersinks of various types. Generally, they come in 30 degree, 45 degree, or 37 degree. And the difference is the 30 degree is, very shallow. It's nice. The 45 degree is one thing, but the 37 degree is the shape of your countersunk screw and your Allen head. So they're all different. And another thing is they come in different shank size. And if you're going to be producing something, are you going to be drilling holes of 1/4 inch size or 5/16 size or 3/8 size? And these drill bits, you might want to get a shank size that's the size of what your job is producing, so that you're not constantly playing with your chuck to put a 1/2 inch shank size when you're drilling a 1/4 inch hole, because you're wasting a lot of time changing your chuck size to do something else that, you see what I'm saying. So anyway, if you're drilling 1/4 inch holes, you want a countersink with a 1/4 inch shank. If you're drilling 3/8 holes, you want your countersink with a 3/8 shank so that you're not playing with your chuck. So just keep that in mind. Now if you're starting out, an end mill set like this is relatively cheap, and you can get by with this for a while until you can afford to expand. And generally the 2-flute are what they call center sharp, and you can plunge with a 2-flute type end mill, whereas this type of end mill you cannot plunge. You've got to have a pilot hole to start with this type of end mill. Okay? So, anyway, this is a 90-degree plank. And where this comes in handy is if you want to drill the wrist pin hole in this piston. You can clamp this onto here and bore that 90-degree hole. So anyway, and then if we look down over here, there's a set of micrometers, 1 to 12 inches. This is a 40-inch or 1 meter vernier caliper. And when you get bigger than those 12 inches, then you're going to need something like this. When I built this engine for this motorcycle, I needed this vernier caliper. Vernier calipers are a bit more difficult to read than, say, a dial caliper. Now, I'm going to go over this with you. I personally like dial calipers because if the jaws are clean, they pretty much return to zero. It's going to make a liar out of me. Okay? Now there's pros and cons to dial calipers versus electronic calipers versus vernier calipers. The cons to dial calipers is they have a rack of teeth here that get debris in them. This is the con to a dial caliper. Okay? The con to an electronic caliper is they go to sleep and they turn themselves off. And if you don't have the jaws absolutely clean and shut when you turn them back on, they won't zero out right. Okay? If you turn them on and the jaw's this wide, that's where they'll read 0. And that's not good. The pros to an electronic caliper is you can push a button and they read metric. And that's nice. Okay. The thing about calipers is you get what you pay for. This is a cheap 1-foot caliper, and the depth gauge is that much off. Okay? This is an expensive Swiss caliper, and the depth gauge is accurate. Okay? So, if you're going to buy a good dial caliper, it's probably worth your while to buy a good Matui-Toho, Fowler, or whatever. If you pay $20 for one, $29 for one, probably the depth gauge is not going to be that accurate. Okay? So, there's one more thing. Let me step aside here a second.